Hey guys, what's up? This is Dan Stevers, and welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about the 3D camera inside of After Effects. Now, the 3D camera is one of the things that I got most excited about when I was learning After Effects, because the camera inside of After Effects works very similar to a camera in real life. You get a lot of the same options. So let's jump into it. There are some project files for this. You should see a link below, so why don't you go ahead and download that before we start. And once you got that downloaded, bring those files in. I'm going to bring those files in right now on my own setup. We got two little trees here that I built for a project a while back, some spooky looking trees here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new composition, and let's see here. Normally I work at 720p, which is what this is, but we're going to shrink it down to 640 by 360 at 24 frames a second here, and we're going to make it the composition 10 seconds long. And we will name the composition, we'll call this Forest Fly Through. Okay. Click OK. I think that's how you spell fly through. I don't know. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is bring both of our trees. We're just going to drop it into our composition here. And the first thing we notice is that they're a little bit big, so with them selected in the timeline here, we'll hit S, and that'll bring up our scale, and then we're going to drag it down a little bit so they're a little smaller. Something like 50% is good for that. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to Layer here, and we're going to go New Camera, and we're going to set this to 1-node camera, not 2-node camera. This is always what I work with, is a 1-node camera, and the reason is a 2-node camera is if you want to pivot around an object, but normally I don't like working that way. I like to have the camera like free moving so I can point it anywhere I want. And we'll leave enable depth of field off. We'll probably leave all these options here. If yours isn't set to 35, why don't you set it to 35, and we'll click OK. And that creates a new camera for us. Now that we've got this created, layers don't start out 3D inside of After Effects. They're always two-dimensional, and we can show that by selecting them and hitting P. And we only have two options to move our layers here. We can either move them along the x-axis here, or we can move them along the y-axis, but we can't move them in the z-axis, which is what gives something depth. So in order to do that, with them selected, well, actually you don't have to have them selected, but we're just going to go over here and we're going to click these little icons, little cube icons, and what these do is these turn the layers 3D. So now they're 3D. Now you don't see a difference when it changes because they're at the zero point in they're at 0 depth basically, which means they're perfectly in the center right now. But we can see how the depth works by changing our view here. So if we go to Active Camera and we go to Custom View here, why don't you select your camera on the timeline? That way it'll show it on your composition window here. If you hold down space, the space bar, and click on your composition here, you can move it around a little bit, reposition it. You can also change the size here if it's too big or too small. Mine's fine how it is though. So anyways, like we were talking about, I'll select tree A here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub this along the z-axis here. I'll push it back to something like 300 there, and now now that tree is in space right there. It's been pushed back in space. If I go up here and grab this camera icon right here, it's called Orbit Camera Tool. There's a drop down menu there, so there are different options here, but you want to select Orbit Camera Tool. And now if I move, click and drag, we'll be able to see that our scene is in fact 3D. We can see some space between our trees here, and that's what we're going for. Because in order to really make the most out of a camera inside of After Effects, you're going to want to have 3D layers to work with, so you can fly your camera around and you can see things in space. Because if you have everything on the same plane, then it's not really going to look that cool if you're moving the camera around. So let's change our view back. We'll click on custom view and we'll go back to active camera. Okay, now we're just going to duplicate some of these trees and move them in space. So I already moved one of them back, so I'm going to select both of these trees and hit P. I'll hit P twice there to bring it up. And so one of them is at 300 depth, one of them is at 0 depth. So I'll duplicate another tree here, move it around. Maybe I'll pull this one forward. So I'll hit P to bring up the position, and then I'm going to scrub it forward. So now we're going negative from where it started at, which means that it's going to be pulling it forward. So if we go negative to something like 200, that looks pretty good there. Kind of position it there. I'll duplicate tree A here. And maybe I'll just move this one over. Maybe I'll pull this one forward a little bit. And maybe I'll make one more tree B and push it back to something like, I don't know, 600 or so is good. Maybe I'll put that there. Oh, what the heck, I'll just do one more. And I think I'll hit scale and flop this one here, so I'll unlink the constrained proportions, and that way maybe so all of our trees don't look identical, so they look a little bit different. And that looks pretty good there. So I can fold up all of these things because I don't need to see that anymore. Now I'm going to select the camera here, and now what we're going to be wanting to do is animate the camera pushing through the scene, so it's kind of like we got a truck shot in, so we're trucking in the camera here. And yeah, so let's select the camera, and we're going to hit P to bring up the position points of the camera. Drag your cursor, make sure it's at 0 here on the timeline, and we're going to hit this we're going to hit the stopwatch here to set a keyframe at the beginning. Now I'm going to go to 10 seconds at the end here. Now I'm going to be doing the same thing I did to the trees, and I'm going to be dragging along the Z axis right here. And as I pull this forward, you'll notice your camera is now pushing through the scene. And I'll push it so it goes past all of them there, and that'll automatically set a keyframe. So now I have 2 keyframes here. And if I hit this render button here, the RAM preview button, we are now going to see our camera animation here. So we're pushing our camera through the forest here, and automatically it's looking pretty cool. I mean, it didn't take too much work. We just had 2 trees and a camera, and now we got something pretty cool. I think I want to see more trees in here because I want to, I don't know, it's just cooler to have more stuff flying by the camera. So you can just go ahead and add maybe a couple more trees to your scene, just so it's I don't know, it's got more stuff, you know, so it looks cool. Okay, there we go. So got a couple more trees in there. And let's see, let's try and spice up this camera movement here, because right now it's only a 2 keyframe animation. We have a start point and an end point. Now if we wanted to have this camera kind of weaving through the trees, not moving in a straight line, why don't we go ahead and set some keyframes for that. So let's select our camera. Let's go up to this orbit camera tool and hold it down. And now we're going to be going to track XY camera tool. And what this lets us do is it lets us move the camera along the X and Y axis right here, so we can really easily just move our camera around. We can position it where we want to. I'm gonna undo that. So like I said, go to about a little more than 2 seconds, and let's move it so it's getting a little close to the trees, you know, because that makes it kind of dynamic looking. Then maybe we'll go to like oh, I don't know, 4 to 6 seconds, somewhere in there. And we're going to do the same thing where we're going to just drag our little tool here, and that's going to make a new keyframe there. And maybe I'll do one at 8 there. I'll drag it down. So basically we're just having some cool movements of weaving through the forest. Now you'll notice it's really jerky right now, and that's because my keyframes are set to linear keyframes. Yours may or may not be. Easy way to see if they are or not is go to our active camera option here and go to right. And as you can see, all of my keyframes here are like hard lines, they're like zigzags here. So if I wanted to smooth those out, what I would do is I'd select my inner 3 keyframes there, just select them on our timeline down here, right click on them, go to keyframe interpolation, and go to spatial interpolation right here. So I'll click on it, and we're going to set it to Bezier. I'll click OK. And there you go. Now we got Bezier curves instead of those linear keyframes there. So that looks pretty cool there. So let's go back to our active camera. And now if we animate this, now we should have a little bit more dynamic of a camera movement. Let's see how this looks here. Okay, cool. So now we're not moving in a straight line anymore. Now it looks a little more interesting. It's a little more dynamic. A quick fix to, well, I shouldn't say a fix, but something to make this look a little smoother is if we right click on these keyframes that we had selected there, and then we go to rove across time. This is just one more option that's going to smooth out our keyframes here. And I did a little tutorial about keyframes and interpolation, and if you want to know more about the rove across time keyframes and how they work, I'd say check that out. But anyways, we'll just set that for now, and that's gonna smooth it out a little bit more. Another way that we can make our camera look a little bit more dynamic here is by adding some rotation to the camera. So if I select the camera, and there's a couple ways I can do this. I'll show you the long way of getting to the camera options here. Is I'll twirl up the arrow here in my timeline, twirl it down, and under transform here you see all the rotation options here. So we got our X rotation, which rotates the camera up and down, or I should say it tilts it up and down, and then we got our Y rotation, which rotates our camera side to side, and then we got our Z rotation here, which pivots the camera on the Z axis here, so we can rotate it that way. The other option of bringing up rotation is just select the camera and hit R, and that way it'll only be the rotation here. We won't have all that other stuff getting in the way. Anyways, so if we go back to the beginning and we set a keyframe on the Z rotation, and I go to, let's say, 4 seconds, and I will bring this to I don't know, like negative, let's go like -17. And then if I go to 8 seconds, maybe I'll put this at like +15. We'll see how that looks. That looks fine. And cool. And we'll just go to 10 seconds, and maybe I'll make it 0 there. Now I want to smooth these all out so the motion is nice and smooth, so I'm going to select them all, right click on the keyframes, go to keyframe assistant, and go to easy ease. A good shortcut for that is you can just hit F9 instead. So now that those are smoothed out, let's check out our animation. So basically animating the camera is all about adding layers of animation. Like we added our first layer, which was getting from point A to point B, and then we added another layer on top of that where we kind of were weaving our camera through the scene, and now we just added another layer where we added some Z rotation to it, which kind of makes it look cooler. Especially for these trees, it kind of works having this kind of like wonky camera going through there, looking all twisted and gnarled. Cool. So there you go. That's a good introduction to the camera there. Let's set up another scene, and we'll talk about some more options of the camera that you have. So we'll go to new scene. We'll call this forest pan. We'll keep all the same options we had before. And I'm gonna make a new composition because we're gonna have a lot of trees in this one, so it's gonna be a lot quicker to put all the trees in a pre-comp here. So I'll just name this layer trees. And I'm gonna unlock the aspect ratio. We'll go, the width is 3000 and the height is 1000. Everything looks good there. You probably may or may not be able to see the whole composition here because it's pretty big. But if I go to fit, that way we're seeing our whole composition there. Now if I drag my trees out onto this, I'm just going to drag them out here, and then I'm just going to kind of space them apart here. I'll duplicate, maybe scale down, and duplicate this guy, and maybe I'll reverse this guy so it doesn't all look the same. Maybe scale him down a bit. Too much. Okay, there we go. Cool, so let's go back into our forest pan. So just click on the tab here and we'll go back to our other scene that we created. Now that we have this trees pre-comp that we made, let's drag our trees pre-comp in, and we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to make a new camera and make sure it's on one node and everything here looks good. Click OK. We have to make this layer 3D again for our camera to work with it, so let's click on the 3D button here. I'm gonna hit S and scale these down a bit. Now I'm gonna duplicate this layer. I'm gonna hit P to bring up the position. I'm gonna pull this one forward, maybe something like -300 is good. Maybe I'll move it because I don't want all the trees, I don't want it to look like they're repeating. I'll go back to our behind layer there and duplicate it again. Hit P. I'm gonna push this one back this time. I'll set this one to +300. Drag it to the bottom there so we don't have to see the bottoms of the tree. And maybe I'll do one more layer too. And this one I'll push back to 600. There we go. So now we got a lot of layers of trees here that we're working with. So let's go ahead and set some keyframes to our camera. We'll twirl down the options here and set a keyframe at the beginning, go to 10 seconds, and now this time I'm going to be not animating the Z axis here, but I'm actually going to be animating the X axis. And so I'll just animate it until I pretty much cleared the trees here. So if we pre-render this now, so now I'm doing a pan of our forest, and it's pretty cool because in After Effects this is the easiest way to create the sense of illusion here, is to just by spacing things out and then doing a simple camera move like this. We see the front things moving faster and the back things moving slower, and that's called parallaxing. And that's kind of what happens, you know, when you're looking outside of your car window and you'll see the things further away from you are moving slower, and then the stuff right beside you is moving real quick. And it's the same thing that's happening in After Effects here. So let's play around with some other options here. Now in the camera option, I'm going to twirl up and twirl down. I'm going to close our transform there, and I'm going to open our camera options here. And now we're going to be looking at depth of field. Now this is really cool because depth of field works very similar to how a real camera works here. First step we got to do is it's set to off, so we got to turn it on. We don't see too much happen right now, but we will. If I go down to this option called the aperture and I crank it up to like 60, now you'll see some things going out of focus here, and then some things are still in focus, like this tree here. Let's go to our custom view 1 and we'll see what's going on with this. I'll go up and select our orbit camera tool and we'll move it around. So what we're going to be looking at here is the focus distance here. And now the focus distance is kind of like on a lens. You're only going to be focusing on one particular point away from the camera at any given time. So if we scrub this thing, you'll notice that you'll see a rectangle here. This pink rectangle moves back and forth. And the way that works is anything that's touching this rectangle right here is going to be in focus, and the further away it is from it, the more out of focus it's going to be. So if I bring that right here, that means that this layer is going to be in focus, this one's going to be kind of out of focus, and then this one's going to be really out of focus here. So if we go back to our active camera here, so like we said, this one was in focus, and then the one behind it was a little out of focus, and then the one way in the back was pretty out of focus. We can crank this up even more. Let's crank up our aperture to like 150 or something. So now we're really seeing this right now. So this one's in really crisp focus here. The one in front's really blurry, and then the ones in the back are pretty blurry. Let's go ahead and do a RAM preview of this just so you can see how awesome this is. Look at that. Awesome. So if we wanted to focus on a different layer on this, it's pretty simple. We have two options of finding the focus here. We can either just manually drag the focus. I want to drag it towards our very front layer here. There we go. So you can try and find it manually like that, or you can go a really good precise way to be real specific with your focus distance is to go and change your view to the top. And if I go to like 50% with the view here, so here's my camera right here. Here's the first layer that's in front of there. There's the second layer, and so on and so forth as it goes back. Now you'll see my pink line right here. Now my pink line's pretty close to this front layer right here, but if I want it to be in like the absolute highest sharpness that we can go for this layer here, I'm gonna drag this focus layer until it's right on the layer there, and that way I know that it's not gonna be out of focus at all. It's gonna be real sharp there, because otherwise it could be just the slightest little bit out of focus, and you don't want that, you know. You want it to be real nice looking. So there we go. So now we know that we're focused on that one right there. So if we play this again, now everything in the background's pretty intensely out of focus, and it's probably a little bit too much, but we're just demonstrating a point. I would definitely dial that back if this were a real project. But for now, this looks pretty cool. Now you can actually animate the focus distance, which I think is so cool. So if we go to like 2.5 seconds here, and I hit the stopwatch for the focus distance, and I'll go like a second down, and then I push it forward. Like I said, I should be looking at my top view to make sure that I'm getting the right thing in focus, but this is just an example right now. I'm gonna select those keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant, easy ease. And now once it gets to this point in the animation, it's gonna pull the focus from the very front tree here to the second to the last tree. That's what I focused on there. You can focus on whatever you want, but this is just an example. So you can see the focus just shifted right now to the tree that's second farthest from the back. So if I just click and play from where we are right there, and right here, ooh, look at that. That looks so nice. It's doing a little rack focus there, which looks so nice. Look at that. I can just watch that over and over again. Cool. So like I said, if you want to dial back the aperture, just take it down a little bit, make it a little bit more natural. Let's go with like 90. Let's go with like 60. See, that looks a lot more natural to me. And there's some different options in here. You can increase the blur amount if you want your things to be like really out of focus like that. You got some other options you can play around with in there. But really that is the basics of the camera inside of After Effects, and hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you guys got excited about the camera in After Effects. Like I said, man, that's where it's at for high-end animation stuff inside of After Effects. It's all about working the camera there. So anyways, my name is Dan Stevers, and thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you around.